Let me know in the chat. What do you guys think the average length is of the tens of thousands of cold calls that people have made through their system and the data? Let me know in the chat. How many seconds do you think the average cold call lasts? And we'll see what the kind of range
Five
is. Charles says 5. That's brutal, dude.
We're going to need to get you on here, Charles. 25, 30.
Yeah, so kind of all over the place. So they took the average length of the recording, and it was about 80 seconds. So that's including the dial time, right? So we could assume it's somewhere probably around 45, 50 seconds. And where people tend to get shut down is in that very like prospect picked up. Oh, shoot, what do I say? Like that little back and forth right there. That's where the cold call is really like you either bought yourself some time or you got immediately shut down. That's where most people run into trouble. So in that first little part, I break up the call into an intro is the first part, that first 60 seconds. There's a hook in the middle, and then there's a close at the end. We're going to probably spend a lot of our time on that intro piece because it's really important. So in the intro, my goal is to make an entrance. So just like entering a party or anything like that, or an event, or going over to a small group get together, whatever it might be, I want to make a really good first impression. So a way that we can kind of think about this is I always want to reverse engineer. Let me ask you, Ryan, do you ever pick up cold calls on purpose?
When I can. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So when you can, you might be one of those rare exceptions of people because you're probably like me and you're kind of fascinated with what other people might say and you respect the craft and all the other stuff.
Yep.
I think we could agree. Let me know if anyone here in the chat disagrees that your prospect probably didn't pick up the call on purpose, thinking it was a salesperson, and then like they were really eager to hear what you said.
That's right.
Probably Annette agrees. Tom says true. So since they didn't pick up the call on purpose, we have to immediately add context to the conversation and differentiate from what the typical experience might be like. So if we think about who is going to be calling these people, most of the time people pick up an unknown number because they think it's an emergency, someone at their school, a kid's school. They might think it's an internal thing. There's all kinds of stuff going on. I want to immediately add context to my intro, and I'm going to do 3 things. They don't necessarily have to be in this order. I want to gain permission. So some sort of permission-based opener, introduce myself, gain permission. I want to add something relevant to the conversation. That relevance, I want to be about that individual or about that company. Show this person that I did my research. I called you on purpose. You weren't just on a big list I was dialing through. I called you on purpose. And then we're going to leverage what's called a priority drop. So priority drop is sort of the reverse pitch. So again, if I'm going to reverse engineer this and think about what the user experience is like being on the receiving end of a cold call, most of the time people pick up and say, "Hey, Ryan, it's Jason with XYZ company. How's it going?" Yeah. Why are you calling? Well, hey, I work with I run a company called Outbound Squad, and we do sales training with other SaaS companies. We do like that's the typical experience of a cold call. It's like immediately get pitched. We want to be the opposite of that.
It's a pitch slap.
A pitch slap. Yeah.
That's what it is.
So the first thing that I would recommend is, especially when you're calling executives, the first sentence that comes out of your mouth, what you could do is work in that relevance piece that we talked about. So we talked about permission-based opener, relevance, priority drop. I'm going to drop in something that is relevant to that individual. So I'll give you an example. I work with a company that sells a customer experience solution to Fortune 1000 companies. A specific persona that they work with is customer support. These are people running huge contact centers. And what they care about is reducing cost to serve. So how do we decrease the amount of our employees' time and resources to serve each of our individual customers? So think of like a Comcast or an Xfinity, thousands, hundreds of thousands of customers. How do we reduce the cost to serve? So in my research, I'm just looking for instances of them talking about stuff like that in their initiatives or something off their LinkedIn profile. And that might sound something like this. Hey, Ryan, I was giving you a call because I noticed that you guys have an initiative just from your Q3 2022 report around reducing cost to serve. Oh, by the way, this is Jason with XYZ company. You got a minute for me to tell you why I'm calling?
So you don't even
open up with something about that person.
You didn't even say your name. You're going right after in this case, the research you've done around an initiative that they care about.
Yep. And you could do that in reverse order if you like. So I think the order of this is not necessarily as important as getting this stuff out. But what I've noticed just in the last 6-9 months of working with reps and doing these myself is that most of the time executives are pretty impatient on the phone and want to understand the reason for your call. And the reason for the call, I'm going to make about you. So think about what are the things that you find. It could be hiring, mergers, acquisitions. It could be that you saw on this LinkedIn's profile. In the case of these customer support personas, oftentimes they list out their accomplishments, how much money they've saved the company. You know what I mean? So any of that kind of stuff that you would normally personalize in a first line of an email, I just want you to open up with that in your call. Hey, Ryan, I was giving you a call because I noticed this or about this, or you listed out this priority. By the way, it's Jason with XYZ company. And then I go into the permission-based element. Do you mind if I take a minute to share the reason for my call? And you can let me know if you want to keep chatting. There's lots of variations of what you can do there, but we'll go ahead and pause there. Ryan, that's what I am a big fan of in that first 15 seconds of the call.
Well, and I think that it's really interesting that there's more and more data now to support this. A lot of times, if you look at different approaches to uh, how you enter a call and what do you say next, historically it's been based on how people feel. Now it's based on data. So the idea that the average conversation is only 80 seconds, including dial time, which is probably closer to 45 seconds, means that, and we talked about this several times for those who've been here before, it's the pitch lab. Hey, this is Ryan, blah, 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 blah. You don't give a break. You just keep going. It sounds like an auctioneer and it's blah, 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 right? Like they're just waiting to say, no, thanks, click, versus finding a way to break up the pattern and begin a two-way dialogue. And what I like about what you're saying right now is the way your framework works is very in line with how Townsend Wardlaw's the art of cold calling. I love his framework too. Very different, but it's intentional. You're saying the same things, but with some psychology baked in, which is this is interruptive communication, right? This idea that someone's calling because they believe like they're ready to talk to you is false, right? It's interruptive communication. All the reasons you listed are likely why they picked up, not because they thought it was a salesperson they wanted to talk to you. And so, how do you get that relevance? Woodward calls it relevant clarity, and in this case, for you, it's gaining that relevance right off the gate in a unique way is really interesting. And I like the idea that you can tie it to initiative that it should trigger, right? Oh wow, this is different. Nobody has entered a conversation with some specific information that would likely be relevant for me. My question then here, Jason, becomes that this is primarily, and I'm guessing just based on your approach as well from the beginning, but this is a very targeted primarily towards the executives, right? Because those are the ones that are going to care more about some sort of public information about, you know, an initiative that was published on maybe their website or a newsletter or something like that, right? So do you actually prospect at all below the power line, or is your approach mostly to those folks that care the most?
Yeah, definitely. This is a great question. So, and I'll answer some of the questions in the chat too. People were asking, should you ask how the person's doing? So I'll get to answer that question too. If you're doing enterprise or strat or even large commercial type of sales motions, there's going to be a lot of information on these companies, right? So there's the amount of companies, the volume is like reduced. So I have more time. It makes more sense to spend that time to do that kind of stuff. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So below the line or on the line, so directors, for example, or someone that's ahead of something, yeah, they're totally worth calling. The way that I can add relevance to that conversation is more through the second part of the call. So maybe I'm just going to say, hey, Ryan, notice that you head up the sales development team at XYZ company. Oh, by the way, it's Jason with Outbound Squad. You got a minute for me to tell you the reason for my call? And I can go in from there. So call out a job title, something about them. It could be really, really simple. So those below the line folks, you're not going to spend a ton of time researching these people because that meeting is not as valuable to you as with a VP, let's say, or a senior vice president of something. So the next part, the should I ask them how they're doing? I mean, Gong actually has a lot of data around the how have you been question. So I just get a vibe. Like if the person sounds like they're someone that like when they say hello, what kind of mental state do they sound like they're in? If it's like, hello, hey, this is Jason. If they sound really impatient, I'm just going to get to the point. If they sound like someone that's friendly or willing to talk and engage, then I'll do the, hey, Ryan, I was giving you a call about the initiative XYZ. By the way, it's Jason with XYZ Company. How have you been? That question, there's a ton of data that supports asking that question. And this is a style and preference thing.
Yep.
How have you been? They tested variants of that against how are you doing? How's your day going? And they found that the how have you been is more like what a friend would ask. And if you can do it in that tone that I did just now, too, the prospect is going to think for a second, do I know this person? Right. So I'm trying to get the prospect in this mode of I'm active listening now.
Right.
I'm not multitasking anymore. You caught me when I was doing email or doing something else. Like I am actively participating in this conversation.
I think that the permission-based opener or just the intro component of it goes right back to this is about finding something that you're comfortable with and being more consistent versus like the actual phraseology, right? So
Mhm.
yeah, there's data that shows some of these things may work better than others. But at the end of the day, if you can't deliver it with confidence, your tonality's off, you're flat versus the way you're supposed to present in a conversational voice, nothing's going to matter. And so, when you're asking these types of questions, for me, I would say try it yourself and see if it lands. If it feels good, you're going to be a lot more successful than if it doesn't. If it doesn't feel natural, you're going to have a really hard time having that conversation. And to Jason's point, every individual is not the same either. So it can work for some people and it may not work for others. The real trick here is if you get shut down, this is a real trick on this 45-second. If you're getting shut down with whatever approach it is, then wait a couple days and call back with something different. And that's where
Yeah.
you're going to really see success because that individual from time to time might even open up differently. They were flat one day and a little bit more friendly the next day. And so you just don't know.
Yeah.
Um, that's the power of the follow up.